Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart through the sterile corridors of the Galactic Medical Station Epsilon 7, his worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floors. The night shift was his domain, when the bustling alien medical facility quieted to a whisper of humming machines and distant conversations in languages he couldn't understand. He'd been working here for 3 years now, ever since the divorce left him struggling to support his daughter Emma on Earth. The station was a marvel of alien engineering, suspended in the void between star systems as a neutral ground for medical emergencies. Ships from across the galaxy brought their sick and wounded here, where the most advanced alien physicians practiced their trade. The Zephyrian doctors with their crystalline minds could diagnose diseases by analyzing molecular patterns in breath samples. The Thoraxian surgeons possessed 8 arms and could perform procedures that would take human doctors' teams of specialists. The ethereal voidlings could peer into cellular structures with their quantum vision. Marcus understood none of their medical jargon, but he understood pain when he saw it. As he emptied waste bins and mopped floors, he witnessed the daily parade of suffering that flowed through these halls. Alien families huddled together in waiting areas, their various forms of tears and grief universal despite their diverse biology. He'd learned to recognize the body language of hope and despair across dozens of species. Tonight felt different, though. There was an electric tension in the air that made his skin crawl. As he worked his way toward the critical care wing, he noticed clusters of medical staff speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Their universal translators buzzed with fragments of conversation about the impossible case and complete medical failure. Dr. Veltar, the station's chief physician, spotted Marcus near the observation deck. The Zephyrian's crystalline body pulsed with agitated blues and purples as she approached. Her voice, filtered through the translation device, carried exhaustion that transcended species. "Human Marcus," she said, her formal tone unable to hide her desperation. "Perhaps your species' perspective might offer insight into our current predicament." Marcus paused, his mop handle gripping tighter. In 3 years, none of the medical staff had ever asked for his opinion on anything beyond the cleaning schedule. "What kind of predicament, Doctor?" Veltar gestured toward the observation window overlooking the critical care ward. "We have a patient who defies all medical understanding. 20 of our finest physicians from across the galaxy have examined the case. Zephyrian molecular analysis, Thoraxian surgical intervention, voidling quantum diagnostics, even Chronac biomanipulation techniques. Nothing works." Marcus approached the window and looked down at the patient bay. A small, delicate creature lay motionless on the biobed, surrounded by more medical equipment than Marcus had ever seen in one place. The being appeared to be from the Stelli species, one of the galaxy's most ancient and revered races. Their kind were known as the galaxy's greatest philosophers and artists, but this one looked barely alive. "What's wrong with her?" Marcus asked, noting the feminine bone structure characteristic of Stelli females. "That's precisely the problem," Veltar's crystalline form flickered with frustrated reds. "Every diagnostic tool we possess indicates she should be in perfect health. Her cellular structure is optimal, her bioenergy readings are normal, all genetic markers show ideal function. Yet she continues to deteriorate. Her consciousness fades more each day, and we cannot determine why." Marcus watched as a team of Thoraxian doctors performed another scan, their multiple arms working in perfect coordination. The equipment hummed and flashed, producing readings that meant nothing to him but clearly frustrated the medical team. "How long has she been here?" he asked. 17 standard days. She was brought in by her family after collapsing during what should have been a routine meditation ceremony. The Stelli have practiced these ceremonies for millennia without incident. There was no trauma, no toxins, no infectious agents. She simply stopped functioning normally. The Stelli female looked so young, probably not much older than Emma. Marcus felt that familiar tug in his chest, the parental instinct that had driven him to work double shifts and sacrifice everything for his daughter's well-being. "What do her family members say happened?" Veltar's form shifted to confused purples. "They report nothing unusual. The ceremony was proceeding normally when Lyralii simply collapsed. They brought her here immediately, believing our advanced medical technology could easily resolve whatever was affecting her. And, you've tried everything? Everything, Veltar confirmed with bitter certainty. Dr. Kethmore performed a complete Kronak bioreconstruction. Dr. Zix97 mapped every neural pathway. The Thoraxian surgical team attempted molecular-level intervention. We've consulted with specialists from 17 different species. Each examination reveals a perfectly healthy individual who is somehow dying before our eyes. Marcus continued watching the medical team work. There was something about their approach that bothered him, though he couldn't put his finger on what exactly. They moved with practiced efficiency, running test after test, consulting readouts and discussing theories in rapid, technical exchanges. "Can I ask you something, doctor?" Marcus said finally. "Of course. In all these examinations and procedures, has anyone actually talked to her? I mean, really talked to her, not just run diagnostics?" Veltar's crystalline structure paused its color shifting. The patient has been largely unresponsive. When conscious, she answers basic questions about her condition, but provides no useful medical information. "That's not what I meant," Marcus said, watching as another team of specialists entered the patient bay with yet more equipment. "Has anyone asked her about her life? Her family? What she was thinking about during the ceremony? What she's afraid of?" The question seemed to perplex the alien physician. Such information would be irrelevant to her medical condition. "We focus on quantifiable, treatable factors." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding beginning to form in his mind. "Doctor, what if the problem isn't medical at all? What if it's something your equipment can't measure?" "That is impossible. If a condition affects biological function, it must have a detectable cause." "But, you said yourself that 20 experts have found nothing wrong with her physically." "Maybe the cause isn't physical." Veltar's form flickered through several colors Marcus had never seen before, indicating what he assumed was deep confusion or possibly offense. "Are you suggesting the problem is psychological? The Stelli possess the most advanced mental disciplines in the galaxy. They do not suffer from primitive psychological ailments." Marcus chose his words carefully, aware he was treading on dangerous ground. "I'm not suggesting she's mentally ill. I'm wondering if something happened during that ceremony that your scanners can't detect. Something that affected her spirit, her will to live, her connection to whatever keeps the rest of us going." The alien doctor stared at him through the observation window, her crystalline form cycling through colors that suggested she was processing this concept with difficulty. "You believe the solution lies in conversation?" "I believe," Marcus said, thinking of all the nights he'd sat by Emma's bedside when she was sick, not because he could cure her fever but because his presence itself was medicine, that sometimes healing requires more than medical expertise. Sometimes it requires understanding what's broken in someone's heart. Veltar was quiet for a long moment, watching the latest team of specialists pack up their equipment after another failed examination. Finally, she spoke. "The family has requested permission to perform their traditional healing rituals. We denied the request, as such ceremonies might interfere with our medical protocols." "What if you're wrong?" Marcus asked quietly. "What if their rituals contain something your medicine doesn't? What if the answer isn't in your equipment but in their culture?" The alien physician's form shifted to deep, contemplative blues. "If we permit their ceremony and the patient dies, it will be seen as our failure to protect her with proper medical intervention. And if you don't permit it and she dies anyway, which seems pretty likely based on what you've told me, then what?" Veltar fell silent again, her crystalline structure dimming as if she was powering down to think more clearly. Around them, the night shift continued its quiet work. Marcus could hear the distant sounds of his fellow maintenance workers, the hum of life support systems, the soft chimes of monitoring equipment. "There is another factor," Veltar said eventually. "The patient's family has become difficult to manage. They are distressed by our protocols and have threatened to remove her from our care if we cannot provide results soon." "Maybe they know something you don't," Marcus suggested. "Impossible. We are the finest medical facility in this sector of the galaxy." Marcus looked down at the dying girl surrounded by the galaxy's most advanced medical technology, then, back at the frustrated alien doctor who represented the pinnacle of interstellar medical knowledge.
Doctor, I've got a daughter back on Earth. She's about the same age as your patient down there. When Emma gets sick, I don't just give her medicine.
I hold her hand. I tell her stories. I listen when she's scared. Sometimes that matters more than anything else I could do for her.
Human emotional support rituals are well documented but medically irrelevant, are they?
Marcus interrupted gently.
Because it looks to me like everything medically relevant has already been tried and failed. Maybe it's time to try something medically irrelevant.
Veltar's form cycled through several rapid color changes before settling on a pale, uncertain yellow.
You are suggesting we abandon scientific medical practice in favor of emotional intervention?
I'm suggesting maybe they're not as different as you think. The alien doctor stared at the scene below for several more minutes. Marcus waited, understanding that he'd pushed as hard as he could without overstepping his position as a mere maintenance worker.
Finally, Veltar spoke. The family's traditional healing ceremony, it would require us to remove most of our monitoring equipment. To dim the lights. To allow unscientific procedures in our sterile environment. And that terrifies you.
It violates every protocol we have established for patient care.
Marcus nodded.
But your protocols aren't working. Another long silence stretched between them as they watched the latest medical team exit the patient bay, their body language radiating the same defeat Marcus had seen in every specialist who'd attempted to treat the dying girl. If I were to hypothetically consider such an action, Veltar said carefully, what role would you envision for yourself in this emotional intervention?
Marcus was surprised by the question. Me?
I'm just the janitor, doctor.
I don't know anything about stellar healing ceremonies.
But you do know about connecting with patients on a non-medical level.
This insight about conversation and emotional support, it comes from your experience as a parent.
Well, yes, but then, perhaps, Veltar said, her crystalline form taking on determined orange hues, it is time for this medical facility to learn something from a human janitor about healing. Marcus felt a flutter of panic. He'd only meant to suggest they listen to the family, not volunteer himself for some kind of alien medical procedure he didn't understand. Doctor, I appreciate the confidence, but I don't speak their language, I don't know their customs, and I definitely don't have any medical training. You have something our medical teams lack, Veltar replied.
You see patients as more than biological systems to be repaired.
Perhaps that perspective is exactly what this case requires.
As if summoned by their conversation, a group of Stelli emerged from the family waiting area and approached the observation deck.
Marcus could see the resemblance immediately. They shared the same delicate bone structure and luminous skin as the patient, though theirs was dimmed by worry and exhaustion. The eldest among them, a male with silver threading through his pale hair, spoke in the melodious tones of the Stelli language. The universal translator rendered his words with formal precision. Honorable physicians, we request once more to perform the ritual of rekindling for our daughter. Your methods have failed, and time grows short. Veltar's form flickered through several colors before responding.
Honored family of Lyralii, we understand your frustration.
However, introducing uncontrolled variables into the treatment environment could kill her, the Stelli father interrupted, his voice carrying an edge of desperation. Your controlled variables are already accomplishing that goal quite efficiently.
Marcus stepped forward before Veltar could respond, addressing the family directly. Excuse me, sir. I know I'm not a doctor, but could you tell me about this ritual? What does it involve?
The Stelli father looked surprised to be addressed by someone in maintenance clothing, but his desperation overcame protocol. The ritual of rekindling is performed when one of our kind becomes disconnected. When the threads that bind us to life and purpose become tangled or severed.
Disconnected from what?
From the song, the father said, as if this explained everything. When Marcus looked confused, he continued.
All Stelli are born hearing the song of existence, the harmonic frequencies that connect all living things.
During meditation, we align ourselves with these frequencies to maintain spiritual and physical health. But, sometimes, the connection is lost. Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind.
And, when someone loses connection to the song, they become physically ill?
Not ill, precisely. They simply fade. Without connection to the song, a stele slowly loses the will to maintain biological function. It is rare, but not unknown among our people.
How does the ritual work? The father's expression grew more animated as he explained. Family members join in harmonic meditation, creating a bridge of sound and intention to guide the disconnected one back to the song.
It requires time, patience, and the removal of artificial interference. Marcus glanced at Veltar, whose crystalline form was cycling through rapid color changes as her translation device struggled with concepts that had no scientific equivalence.
Artificial interference, Marcus repeated. Like medical monitoring equipment?
The electronic frequencies disrupt the harmonic patterns, another family member explained.
We cannot reach her through such interference. Veltar's form flashed bright red. You are describing an entirely unsubstantiated phenomenon.
There is no scientific basis for, Doctor, Marcus interrupted gently.
Do you have a scientific basis for why she's dying?
The alien physician's protests died in a flicker of frustrated colors.
Marcus turned back to the Stele family. This connection to the song, is it something that can be lost permanently? If the disconnection persists too long, yes, the father said sadly. The threads that bind consciousness to physical form weaken until they cannot be restored. We estimate Lyralii has perhaps 2 of your standard days before the disconnection becomes irreversible. And, you're certain the ritual can restore this connection? We have performed successful rekindings before, though never under such artificial conditions.
The sterile environment, the constant electronic monitoring, the chemical residues from medical procedures, all of these create barriers to the harmonic frequencies we need to establish. Marcus looked down at the patient bay, where yet another teen was preparing to run another round of tests on the dying girl. He thought of Emma, of how she always slept better when he hummed her favorite lullabies, how her fever broke faster when he held her hand and told her stories.
What would you need? He asked.
For the ritual to work?
The family exchanged glances before the father replied.
A quiet space, free from electronic interference.
Natural lighting or darkness. Permission to use our traditional instruments and incenses.
And, most importantly, uninterrupted time to establish the harmonic bridge.
How long would it take? The ritual itself requires a full day and night cycle.
Preparation, the actual ceremony, and integration afterward.
Veltar's form flashed through alarmed colors. A full day without medical monitoring? Absolutely impossible. If her condition deteriorates during that time, it's already deteriorating, Marcus pointed out.
Your monitoring hasn't stopped that. The alien doctor fell silent, her form dimming as she processed this uncomfortable truth. Marcus looked at the desperate family, then, at the frustrated doctor, then, down at the dying girl surrounded by useless technology. He thought of all the nights he'd worked this job, watching alien medicine fail as often as it succeeded, seeing the gaps between scientific knowledge and actual healing.
Doctor, he said finally, what if we could create a compromise? What kind of compromise? What if I stayed with the patient during the ritual?
I could monitor her condition without electronic equipment, just basic observation for any obvious signs of crisis. If something goes wrong, I could call for immediate medical intervention. Both Veltar and the Stele family stared at him in surprise.
You would be willing to take responsibility for her life during this unscientific procedure?
Veltar asked. I'd be willing to help give her family a chance to save her, Marcus corrected. And, to learn something that might help other patients in similar situations. The Stele father stepped closer.
Human, you do not understand the risks you offer to take.
If the ritual fails despite proper conditions, if Lyralii cannot find her way back to the song, there will be nothing you can do.
No medicine can restore a connection that has been permanently severed. And, if we don't try the ritual, she dies anyway, Marcus replied.
At least this way, she gets to die surrounded by family performing ceremonies that mean something to her, instead of alone with machines that can't help her. Veltar's crystalline structure went through a series of rapid color changes before settling on a pale, uncertain blue.
This would be completely unprecedented.
I would need approval from the station administrator, from the medical board. From how long would that take?
Marcus asked.
Several standard days, at minimum.
She doesn't have several days.
The alien doctor and the human janitor stared at each other through the observation window, while below them, the galaxy's most advanced medical technology continued its futile battle against a problem it couldn't understand. Finally, Veltar spoke. There is an emergency provision that allows the chief medical officer to authorize experimental treatments when conventional medicine has been exhausted.
Which it has been.
Which it has been, she agreed reluctantly. But such authorization requires a qualified medical advocate to accept responsibility for patient safety during the experimental period.
I already volunteered for that. You are not medically qualified. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then asked, Doctor, what are my daughter Emma's qualifications for helping me when I'm sick? Your daughter is not. This is completely different, is it?
Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the most qualified medical minds in the galaxy have tried everything they know how to do, and it hasn't worked.
Maybe it's time to try something that doesn't require medical qualifications.
Veltar's form cycled through several more color changes before she turned to address the Stelly family. If we were to attempt this ritual, you would need to accept full responsibility for any complications arising from non-medical intervention.
We accept, the father said immediately. We have always held responsibility for our daughter's well-being. We merely seek the opportunity to exercise it.
Marcus felt the weight of what he was proposing settling on his shoulders. He was a maintenance worker with a high school education, offering to oversee an alien religious ceremony that could determine whether a young being lived or died. It was completely insane. But watching the girl slowly fade away while surrounded by technology that couldn't help her was insane too. All right, he said, surprising himself with his certainty.
Let's give it a try.
The preparation took 6 hours. Marcus watched as the medical bay was transformed from a sterile technological environment into something that felt almost sacred. The Stelly family moved with practiced efficiency, removing electronic equipment piece by piece while Veltar supervised with obvious distress, her crystalline form cycling through anxious colors. Marcus had never seen alien religious artifacts before. The Stelly brought instruments that seemed to be made from crystallized starlight, chimes that resonated with frequencies he could feel in his bones, and incense that made the air shimmer with colors he didn't have names for. They arranged these items in precise patterns around Lyraliai's biobed, creating geometric designs that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The harmonic resonators must be positioned according to the stellar alignments present at the time of her birth, explained Kalen, Lyraliai's father, as he adjusted a collection of crystalline instruments. Each Stelly is born attuned to specific frequency patterns based on their birth constellation. Marcus nodded, not really understanding but trying to follow along.
And these patterns are unique to each individual?
As unique as your genetic code, perhaps more so. The song that each of us hears is a personal harmonic signature that connects our consciousness to the greater symphony of existence. Dr. Veltar, monitoring the proceedings from the observation deck, interjected through the intercom. Human Marcus, I must emphasize that once we begin this procedure, standard medical intervention will be severely limited.
The frequency generators they're installing will interfere with most of our monitoring equipment.
Marcus looked down at Lyraliai, who hadn't moved or shown any sign of awareness since he'd been watching. Her breathing was so shallow it was barely visible, and her skin had taken on a translucent quality that made her look more like a fading ghost than a living being. How will I know if something's going wrong? He asked Kalen. The ritual itself will provide indicators, the Stelly father replied. If Lyraliai begins to respond to the harmonic bridge, her bioluminescent patterns will become visible. If the connection cannot be established, her luminescence will continue to fade until.
Until what?
Until her light goes out entirely.
Marcus swallowed hard.
In human terms, he was about to monitor a patient's vital signs by watching for alien mood ring effects. It seemed absurdly inadequate, but, given that conventional medical monitoring had accomplished nothing, maybe absurd was exactly what the situation required. Lyreliai's mother, Serafina, approached with a bowl of what looked like liquid starlight. "We must cleanse the space of artificial influences before we can begin," she explained, beginning to trace patterns in the air above her daughter's still form. The liquid light dripped from her fingers but seemed to evaporate before touching any surface, leaving behind a scent like ozone and flowers.
As the cleansing ritual continued, Marcus found himself remembering the nights he'd spent in Emma's room when she was very young and afraid of the dark.
He'd made up stories about the shadows on the walls, turning them from monsters into friendly guardians. He'd sung half-remembered lullabies and invented constellations in the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling. There was something similar happening here, he realized. The Stelli weren't just performing medical intervention, they were reshaping the entire environment into something that could support their daughter's return to consciousness. They were telling a story with light and sound and scent, creating a narrative that her fading mind could follow back to the world of the living. "Human Marcus," Kaelin called softly.
"We are ready to begin.
You should position yourself where you can observe Lyreliai directly but not interfere with the harmonic patterns." Marcus took a seat in the chair they'd indicated, close enough to the biobed to see every detail of Lyreliai's condition but outside the geometric patterns they'd created with their instruments. The position felt familiar, it was exactly where he'd sit when Emma was sick, close enough to help but not hovering. Serafina took her position at Lyreliai's head, while Kaelin and two other family members, siblings, Marcus guessed, arranged themselves at cardinal points around the bed. As they began to take their positions, Dr. Veltar's voice crackled through the intercom one final time.
"I am documenting this procedure under emergency experimental protocols.
Human Marcus, you are authorized to call for immediate medical intervention if you observe any signs of patient distress."
"Understood, Doctor."
The Stelli family joined hands, creating a circle around their daughter's still form.
Kaelin nodded to Marcus. "We begin now.
The first phase will establish harmonic resonance. This may take several hours." What followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The family began to hum, their voices blending into harmonies that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The crystalline instruments responded to their voices, adding overtones and frequencies that made the air itself seem to vibrate with purpose.
At first, nothing visible happened.
Lyreliai remained motionless, her breathing unchanged, her skin still that worrying translucent pale. But, gradually, Marcus began to notice subtle changes in the environment around her. The shadows cast by the harmonic resonators seemed to pulse in rhythm with the family's breathing. The shimmer in the air from the incense began to form patterns that reminded him of aurora lights.
Hours passed.
The family never broke their concentration, never stopped the endless weaving of harmonies that filled the space with something that felt alive. Marcus found himself falling into the rhythm of it, his own breathing synchronizing with theirs, his heartbeat adjusting to match the pulse of the crystalline instruments.
During the fourth hour, something changed.
It started as the faintest glow beneath Lyreliai's skin, so subtle that Marcus thought he might be imagining it. But, as the family's song continued, the glow became more distinct. Patterns began to emerge across her arms and face, delicate traceries of light that pulsed in harmony with the music surrounding her.
"Is that?"
Marcus started to whisper, then caught himself. The family had warned him that any disruption during the harmonic bridging could break the connection they were trying to establish.
But Kaelin had noticed it too.
The patterns of light spreading across his daughter's skin caused his voice to strengthen, and the other family members responded in kind. The harmonies became more complex, adding new frequencies that made the air shimmer more brightly. Marcus watched in fascination as the light patterns grew more intricate. They reminded him of circuit boards, or maybe neural networks, spreading across Lyreliai's skin in branching paths that seemed to connect to something beyond her physical form. As the patterns became more complex, her breathing deepened slightly. Through the observation window, he could see Dr. Veltar's crystalline form flashing through rapid color changes as she tried to understand what she was witnessing. Her frustration at being unable to monitor the patient conventionally was obvious, but she maintained her position and didn't interrupt. The first phase lasted 8 hours.
When the family finally allowed their voices to fade to silence, Lyralii was covered in a network of softly glowing patterns that pulsed with their own rhythm.
Her breathing was stronger, more regular, though she still showed no signs of consciousness. "The harmonic bridge is established," Kalen announced quietly, his voice hoarse from hours of singing. "Now we must guide her consciousness back across it."
"How do you do that?" Marcus asked.
"With stories," Serafina replied, settling into a more comfortable position beside her daughter's bed. "We tell her the stories of who she is, where she came from, what she means to us. We remind her of every reason she has to return to the zone." Marcus felt a jolt of recognition. This was exactly what he did for Emma when she was sick: tell her stories about her own life, remind her of all the people who loved her, paint pictures of all the things waiting for her when she felt better.
"Would it help," he asked hesitantly, "if I told her about my daughter?
About what it's like being a parent who's watching their child suffer and feeling helpless to fix it?"
The family exchanged glances. "You believe your story would reach her?" Kalen asked.
"I think," Marcus said, looking down at the glowing patterns spreading across Lyralia's skin, "that parents probably sound the same in any language when they're trying to call their children home."
Serafina's eyes filled with what might have been tears, though they glowed with the same soft light as her daughter's patterns.
"Yes," she whispered.
"Yes, I think she would understand that song very well." So they began the second phase.
The family took turns telling stories of Lyralia's life, her first steps, her first words, her favorite games, her proudest achievements, her dreams for the future. They painted a picture of a young being who loved mathematics and music, who could solve complex equations while composing symphonies, who wanted to study the harmonic frequencies of distant stars. When it was Marcus's turn, he found himself talking about Emma. About the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, how she insisted on wearing mismatched socks because she said it made her feet more interesting, how she'd stayed up all night with him when he had the flu, bringing him terrible soup and reading him stories from her picture books.
"She's about your daughter's age," he told Lyralii's still form. "And she's stubborn like you probably are.
When she decides she doesn't want to do something, it takes an act of God to change her mind. But when she loves something, when she really cares about it, there's no force in the universe that can stop her."
As he spoke, the light patterns on Lyralii's skin seemed to pulse more brightly.
"Encouraged," he continued. "The thing about being a parent is that you'd do anything to protect your child from pain, but you can't. Sometimes they have to go through hard things, and all you can do is be there with them. All you can do is keep reminding them that they're loved, that they matter, that the world is a better place because they're in it."
The glow spreading across Lyralii's skin was definitely responding to his voice now.
Where the patterns had been steady before, they now flickered and pulsed in rhythm with his words. "Your parents have been here for weeks," he continued. "They've watched teams of doctors try everything they could think of to help you. They've stayed strong even when they were scared, because that's what parents do.
They never gave up on you, not for a single moment." One of Lyralii's fingers twitched.
It was such a small movement that Marcus almost missed it, but the family saw it immediately. Their own patterns, for Marcus could see now that they all had faint glowing traceries visible on their skin, brightened in response.
"She's listening," Serafina breathed. "The connection is strengthening." Marcus kept talking. About the sacrifices parents make without thinking twice. About the way love can persist across any distance or difficulty. About the unique space every child occupies in their parents' hearts that nothing else can ever fill.
"I work here because Emma needs me to," he said. "I clean floors and empty trash cans because that's how I can provide for her. And I clean 1,000 floors, work 1,000 night shifts, if that's what she needed. Because she's my daughter, and that means she's worth everything I have to give."
Lyralii's breathing had definitely changed.
It was deeper now, more rhythmic, as if she was beginning to participate in the harmonic patterns surrounding her rather than just being supported by them. "Your family has given everything they have to bring you home," Marcus continued. "They've challenged the most advanced medical facility in the galaxy because they refused to let you go. They've sat with you through every dark hour, singing you back toward the light." The patterns on Lyralii's skin were growing brighter, more complex, spreading from her arms and face to cover her entire visible body. But, more importantly, her eyelids were beginning to flutter.
That's what love looks like, Marcus said softly. It looks like never giving up, even when everything seems hopeless. It looks like trying new things, impossible things, because the alternative is unacceptable. It looks like a family willing to teach alien doctors about healing with songs instead of scalpels. Through the observation window, he could see Dr. Veltar leaning forward, her crystalline form blazing with excited colors as she witnessed something that all her medical training said was impossible. Lyraliai's eyes opened. They were filled with the same soft light as the patterns covering her skin, but there was awareness in them now, consciousness returning like sunrise after a long night. "Mother," she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying harmonics that made the crystalline instruments around her chime softly in response. Serafina sobbed, a sound of pure joy that needed no translation. She reached for her daughter's hand, and, when their skin touched, both of their light patterns flared brighter. "We're here, little star," Serafina said. "We're all here. You're safe." Lyraliai's eyes moved slowly around the circle of her family, taking in each face as if seeing them for the first time. When her gaze reached Marcus, she paused. "You're not Stelly," she observed, her voice growing stronger. "No," Marcus replied. "I'm human. My name is Marcus, and I'm here because your family taught me something important about healing." "What did they teach you?" Marcus glanced at the family surrounding the bed, all of them glowing with patterns of joy and relief, then, back at the young woman who had been dying just hours before. "They taught me that sometimes the best medicine isn't medicine at all," he said. "Sometimes it's just love, speaking loudly enough to call someone home." Lyraliai smiled, and, when she did, her entire being seemed to light up from within. The patterns covering her skin danced and swirled, painting the room with colors that had no names. "I heard you," she said simply. "All of you. I was lost in the darkness between songs, but I heard you calling, and I followed your voices home." Dr. Veltar's voice crackled through the intercom, barely controlled excitement making her formal tone waver. "Patient appears to be responsive and oriented. Requesting permission to begin standard post-recovery monitoring." Marcus looked at the family. "Is she strong enough for that now?" Kaelin checked the harmonic resonators, which were chiming softly in complex patterns. "The connection to the song is stable now. Medical monitoring should not interfere with her recovery." "Doctor," Marcus said toward the intercom, "you can bring your equipment back in. But maybe bring it in slowly? Let her adjust to having technology around her again." "Understood." "And human Marcus?" "Yes, Doctor? I believe the medical community owes you a significant debt of gratitude." Marcus looked around the room at the alien family whose love had literally sung their daughter back to life, at the young woman who had found her way back from somewhere science couldn't measure, at the harmonic instruments that had bridged the gap between consciousness and despair. "I think," he said quietly, "we all learned something new today." As the medical teams began to cautiously reintroduce monitoring equipment and Dr. Veltar started her examinations, Marcus realized this was just the beginning. Word of what had happened would spread throughout the medical station, then, beyond to the galaxy's broader medical community. Somewhere in the station's corridors, other desperate families were probably waiting for miracles that conventional medicine couldn't provide. Other patients might be suffering from ailments that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with the connections between living beings that no scanner could measure. The galaxy's medical establishment was about to learn that sometimes the most important healing happened in the spaces between heartbeats, in the harmonics of hope, in the simple act of one person refusing to let another face the darkness alone. And it had all started with a janitor who remembered what it felt like to sit beside a sick child's bed and sing her back to sleep. News of Lyraliai's recovery spread through the medical station like ripples across water. Within 48 hours, Marcus found himself at the center of a storm of attention he never wanted and definitely wasn't prepared for. Dr. Veltar had filed her report with the station's medical board, describing what she carefully termed successful integration of cultural healing practices with standard medical protocols. Word had reached the Galactic Medical Consortium, the Interspecies Health Authority, and half a dozen other organizations that Marcus had never heard of but which apparently took great interest in unprecedented medical recoveries.
Marcus was trying to return to his normal routine, emptying trash, mopping floors, maintaining the comforting anonymity of the night shift, when his supervisor found him in supply closet 7. Chen, Chief Maintenance Officer Krog rumbled in his gravelly Thoraxian voice, all 8 arms gesticulating with agitation.
Station Administrator wants to see you. Now. Marcus set down his mop. Am I in trouble? Don't know. Never seen the administrator look like this before. Could be good trouble or bad trouble.
Bad trouble, Marcus reflected as he made his way to the administrative levels, was still trouble. He'd spent 3 years flying under the radar, doing his job competently but without drawing attention. Now he was walking into the station commander's office to discuss his unauthorized involvement in alien religious ceremonies. Station Administrator Tvel was a voidling, one of the ethereal beings who existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions that hurt human brains to think about.
Her translucent form flickered between visible and invisible as she spoke.
Human Marcus Chen, she said, her voice echoing strangely as it emerged from whatever dimension most of her consciousness inhabited.
You have created quite a situation. Yes, ma'am. I understand if there need to be disciplinary measures? Tvel's form solidified slightly, expressing what might have been amusement.